Okay, hi everybody. As usual, I'm months behind everyone else, and I've just noticed that Lisa Pepez has a nice hashtag. It's called 21 Tarot Questions, and Candy drew my attention to it, and I can't resist it, so I'm going to do my best, okay? Number one, what is the deck they'll have to pry out of your cold, dead hands? It's the original Aquarian deck. You can see this is a bit faded. I guess this is from about 1980 or something. For many years, this was tarot cards for me. I was blissfully unaware of the RWS. And in later years, I came to realize that it's not a perfect deck. I think the Major Arcana takes some dreadful liberties. And, you know, the drawing isn't that good. But I think the artist got a lot right with this deck. It's just simple enough to work in a kind of hieroglyphic way. There's quite a lot of white in the background, which is great. Again, the faces aren't great, but I don't think you need great faces in tarot. You see the suit symbols very clearly. They're very consistent. As I say, that Emperor's okay. That Fool's very nice, and that Judgment's kind of fine. But there are some funny Major Arcana cards. I like that Queen. I like the Aces. I love that luxurious 9, and I love that Sun. I think that Moon. I mean, the Sun and the Moon. Love them or hate them, they're not very strong on tarot symbolism. They're just Art Deco fantasias. I love that phallic ace. I like the blue skies, the purple skies. I like the court cards, even though again they're not terribly strong on symbolism. And then that star, you know, that's really not a tarot star. That's not really a tarot lovers. That's not really a tarot temperance, and so forth. That's not really a chariot. But, you know, I was reading with these at the age of 19, and they worked. And through these cards, I perceived that, you know, there is a whole nother world of stuff that we don't know about. And there's another way of using your brain. And so, you know, this is early tarot days for me. Out of my cold, dead hands, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm horrified to say that, you know, some twit told me to keep my tarot wrapped up in silk. And so I did, and threw away the box. Now I wish I kept the box. What's your guilty pleasure deck? Well, this is a recent acquisition. I've always known of the existence of this one. And I've always known that it was going to be a very guilty pleasure. The Hanson Roberts deck, you know, it's just, as you can see, it's just wildly kitsch. The backs are nice, aren't they? And it's a nice format. It's a bit shorter and fatter than most. It's a hobbity deck. And I'm very suspicious of hobbity things. And I'm suspicious of Lord of the Rings and Glastonbury and all that cutesy spirituality. The huge problem with this deck is the women and children. All the sweetness in this deck is over-egged. It's just syrupy. I think that's a horrible fool. Some of the kings are okay. Some of them are not. Some of the majors are, you know, compact, and some of the colours are lovely. That's a really, really nice card. I think these cartouches, if that's the right word, are awful, and every card has one. That's rather nice, isn't it? But, you know, you get to the girls, or the girly angels, and all the young androgynous pages, and everything's a bit kind of dolly bird. That's rather nice. And that's rather nice, and that's rather nice. But I mean, maybe I'm just too much of an old puff, but I find the young women a bit much, and I find that the children, again, maybe I should go ahead and have some children of my own, and then my feelings would change. But I find those children You know, a bit frightening. And that one. And that one. A nice fat sorrow card. And a gorgeous gleaming ace. So, you know, it's a guilty pleasure. I can't imagine myself, you know, reading for the Prime Minister of France with a tarot as dodgy as this. And I don't often read for myself, but sometimes I take it out and look at it and wish that I liked it more than I do. I think, and that's another really saccharine sweet face, Queen of Battens, who is there on the front of the box. So obviously the makers think that's, you know, good stuff. What's the deck you wished existed? I wish there was a good RWS Marseille hybrid, but as far as I can tell, there isn't. I'm going to do a video about it soon. I've acquired a few by fair means or foul, but I don't think I found a good one. What deck would you give to a new reader? Okay, good question, Nisa. And I think I would give a new reader the Smith-Waite Borderless. And this is the Centennial Edition, isn't it? Because it's borderless, it looks kind of contemporary and chic. You could use this to read tarot for the French president, couldn't you? And you couldn't be accused of not being chic. Clearly, when they make things borderless, they kind of have to cheat the edges a bit and add little bits, but that's fine. And the colours on these have been adjusted. They've got a slight sepia tint, and so those screaming RWS colours are calmed down. I also want to say that the full size version of this borderless Smith-Waite seems to be nicer than the bridge size. The bridge size seems to have come out a bit dark, but I really think this is a very, very respectable, very palatable RWS. And I think I probably would give that to a beginner. You could give a beginner something like the Aquarian or the Morgan Greer, I suppose, for a laugh, if the person was very young and easily scared and wanted something very friendly. But I think it's better to start off with RWS, then you know where you are. Number 5, what deck do you want to get along with, but it just never clicked? Ladies and gentlemen, I really liked the Ghetto Tarot. It's a staged photographic deck shot in Haiti, and I absolutely adore the deck, but I cannot read with photographed decks, staged decks. And so I kept it and kept it and kept it, and then I thought, well, someone should be enjoying this deck because it's a lovely product, so I gave it away to a friend. What deck do you only keep for the art? Well, it's the New American Tarot by David Aaron Smith, which is an amazing art object. Those are the backs. Here are the fronts, and he's changed the suits. He's got tablets instead of pentacles. He's got water bottles instead of cups. He's got guns instead of swords. There they are going through a heart. And he's got planks instead of batons. And I think this is all very imaginative, and I think the function of art is to jolt us out of our complacency. And I think it does that. It's set in a sort of dystopian America. Really quite frightful in some ways. But what's clever about it is that he has started off with the RWS. He said that he traced the RWS, and then he created his cards on the basis of those templates. It's not true of the court cards, that he didn't trace the court cards. That's the King of Swords is, I think, quite a long way away from the positioning of the original. But there is, you know, there you are. Queen of Swords, sort of the same position as the RWS Queen of Swords. They're lovely cards. I couldn't possibly work with them because I think what he's done to the pips, to the 4 suits, is just too crazy. And I think what he's done to the court cards is too crazy. There's the Knight of Cups that used to be, and now he's doing a tightrope walk over the Grand Canyon. It's lovely, but it's not really for me. 7. What deck did you buy because everyone else did? Well, I'm blissfully unaware of what everyone else is doing, so I don't think I've ever really bought a deck for that reason. What deck is over your head or just baffles you? Well, ladies and gentlemen, yes, it is our old friend, the Thoth. It's over my head and it baffles me, well, because I don't know enough about it. And I've already said some superficial things about the Thoth, and I've already been told off for it. But what I want to say is I'm repenting the error of my ways, and I've just got myself a biography of Aleister Crowley, a great big, very contemporary, very recent one with lots and lots of new research. And I think that's going to really change my opinion of Crowley. The problem with the Thoth is that it's a Pips deck, and I've been reading with RWS images since I was a kid, and all these major arcanas are great, but you get to the minors and you've got to put up with that kind of stuff. So I'm not making a negative judgment of this, not yet anyway. It's clearly very accomplished and pretty, and there's clearly a lot in it, and people swear by it. But I'm just saying, I'm answering the question. It is over my head at the moment. It baffles me at the moment, and maybe in the future I will get my mind around it. So we live in hope, ladies and gentlemen. Next question. Which deck surprised you? And it is, ladies and gentlemen, the Modern Witch, which my naughty flatmate gave me in this reduced version, which I, as a law-abiding citizen, suspect of being a knockoff. And so, as is my duty, I'm going to call the police, aren't I? And I'm going to tell on my flatmate. I'm going to say, he bought a knockoff. Just kidding. I would never do that. So why did this surprise me? Because I thought, well, this is clearly a deck for young ladies. There aren't any gentlemen in this deck, as far as I can tell. And so it's clearly not a deck that particularly, calls out to me as a target audience. And it's not a thing. I mean, monosex decks, I think they're absolutely fine. There's room in the world for monosex decks, but the nearest I've got to a monosex deck is the Oculi Occultati, but that also has women in it. It has queens in it. It has an empress, and it has female lovers. It's got a lot of men, but So I think monosex decks are a bit strange, because I don't really see how you can apply them to, negotiating your way through life. Even if you have a monosex tarot, as soon as you leave your front door, it's not going to be monosex going up and down the street, isn't it? But what I want to say is this deck did surprise me because I think it's very well done. I think it's very well drawn. I think the colours are good. I like the relationship it has with the Pam images. It's just close enough, but it's far enough away to be interesting. And it's witty and it's sparky. And I think up to a certain point, you could read with it, why not? Yeah, I just think it's very, very nicely drawn. So hats off to the Modern Witch deck, even though I am not its ideal audience. Which deck doesn't really work for you, but you keep it because it is a collectible? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Keishobu, a re-edition of the Keishobu. This is originally a Japanese deck from the 70s, the first ever tarot deck to be printed in Japan. And this one, very boldly, went for immediately it dived in and went for a Marseille Rider-Waite-Smith fusion. So you have, you know, the Rider-Waite-Smith pip card images executed in a Marseille way. And a contemporary artist has restored and re-released this deck. And here you can see, you know, the majors are quite Marseille-like. And the court cards. And then there's another RWS style pip card, which carries on with this Marseille woodcut sort of imagery. It doesn't really work for me because the artist has recolored it. In the original version, because it was made by Japanese people, because it was made by a Japanese designer, everyone was white and everyone was blonde, because I guess that's what the Japanese in the 70s thought we looked like over here in Europe. So they all look like that in the original. And the lady who restored this deck put in some black skin, she put in some different hair colours, and also, while she was at it, she changed the colour of the backgrounds, the sky. So you've got a pink there and a blue there. You've got a yellow background there. Okay, so you've got a beige there and a yellow there. And I must say, I was excited to get hold of this deck, and I just can't read with it at all. I have hardly tried to read with it. I think it's unreadable. The restorer has also released a restored copy which is unrecolored, so she calls it the blonde version. In a sense, I wish I'd got that, but actually I think it's unreadable with, to me anyway, because the cards, everything's squashed in to these sort of woodcut frames, and the cards all look very, very similar. Look, there's a four of pentacles, and they just all look so similar. They're not easily recognized. And there's a five of swords. There's always a close-up image who looks a bit like a court card. And, you know, when they go down on the table, there is just not enough variation. So I think full-on unreadable with, but I think even though it's a modern, restored, reissued version, I think in its way it is a bit collectible. Which is your favourite gilded deck? Well, that's a no-brainer. It has to be the Golden Art Nouveau Tarot, drawn by Julia F. Massaglia, a lovely, lovely artist, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's... this could have been my guilty pleasure. It's too gilded. There's gold all over it, and it's a bit much. But Julia Massaglia is a great artist, and this is really irresistible. I think this is one of her best decks. So if you're in the mood for something gilded, the Golden Art Nouveau is the one for you. The cardstock is not fantastic. It's a low Scarabeo deck, so the cards are quite tall and thin. But it's just kind of magnificent, and there are times when only this deck will do. So I think it's quite highly recommended. You could even have it as a first deck. It could be a beginner's deck. It's very faithful to RWS, and it's very energetic, and it's very, what's the word? It's very elegant, and so you know, it's a lot of fun. Okay, question number 12. Which deck do you love but hate the cardstock? Here we have the Melanated Classic Tarot. It's a lovely beast. It's your tarot if you're looking for a person of colour tarot, what you might call a global majority tarot. So what we have is here a redrawing of the RWS with melanated skin tones and different faces, different hair, different colours. The colours are really, really reimagined, and I think the colours are absolutely gorgeous. Very warm and hearty and comforting colours. And very, very close to the RWS. So if you're an RWS reader, you're on very firm ground here. But I don't really think they've got the production terribly, terribly good. When it first came out, it had borders, and the borders were not nice. I think they were brown or a colour I didn't like, and I didn't buy it. Then they made a borderless deck, which is a great improvement. But in the process of turning it into a borderless deck, I think they shaved off some of the edges. Like, look at this here, the 5 of Pentacles. That window's just been chopped right off. I think the minor arcana suffered more than the majors. But it's such a nice deck to have, and it's such a nice way to vary your practice, to have these different faces and this different sort of rather African atmosphere, that I highly recommend it. And you don't worry too much about the cardstock, because in the end, it's all about the images you see on the table, isn't it? Okay, exciting. Which deck gives you the willies? That's quite easily answered, isn't it? It's the Carl W. Rurig deck, ladies and gentlemen, which I inherited when a friend of a friend passed away. And to do him justice, this friend of a friend, he'd never even opened this deck. He probably knew how ghastly it was going to be. It's a sort of, it's inspired by the Thoth. Look at this graphics, appalling. It's in German. Königin der Schwerter, the Queen of Swords, with the word Schwerter in grey underneath, swords. So very much taking a leaf out of the Thoth Tarot's book there. But, you know, it's just extraordinarily tasteless. If I make a video about kitsch tarots, it will feature. It seems to be weirdly sexist. You know, you're in outer space for a lot of the time. You're in a sort of hallucinatory world in another dimension, but women's breasts just fly through space and appear out of nothing. You know, because I guess maybe when you're a straight man, that's what life is like. You're walking down the street and you see a woman's breast up in the clouds, you know, like a vision. Some of these are sort of almost okay, but let me show you. Is it okay that card gives me the willies? Should I like it? I find the women extremely artificial, and they're just slathered in 80s makeup. And I find, you know, puff that I am, I quite like some of the male characters because they've got less makeup on, I suppose. But look, is it okay not to like that? I mean, even that I find a bit crap. Some people love this deck. They might sort of get like an 80s buzz from it, I suppose. That, but then, you know, the men I find less offensive. Maybe because it doesn't engage the artist's sort of, you know, strangeness. But well, okay, then I will, after this I will shut up. I think it's fair to say that image gives me the willies big time. It's just, you know, it's like, what's on a man's mind, ladies and gentlemen? What's on a man's mind? Well, that is on a man's mind. And I mean, it's not just ladies' body parts, it's gentlemen's body parts. And the whole thing is just too horrible. Look, the Ace of Cups. And the word ace in German is ass. So that is the Ass of Cups. Look, another disembodied breast. So I'm going to stop now. It looks like that poster in the 70s where there was a lady playing tennis and, you know, she wasn't wearing knickers under her tennis mini skirt, was she? And everyone thought that was frightfully exciting. So yeah, that, ladies and gentlemen, is a deck I inherited. I didn't invest my pocket money on that one. Though maybe many a schoolboy did back in the day. 14. What's your favourite deck for shadow work? It's a good question. I'm not entirely clear what shadow work is, although I kind of think I've done shadow work, but not with tarot cards. So answers in the comments. Okay, next question. Which deck do you love in theory but not in practice? And it's Le Tarot de Marseille Weight. This is a lovely project. It's like the Concorde. It's in English and it's in French. And it attempts to give us a hybrid of Marseille and the Rider-Waite-Smith. And I got this because I was getting a bit fed up with the Rider-Waite-Smith's Major Arcana. So I thought, oh, La Papesse. I've always wanted a deck with La Papesse in it and Le Pape, because I'm not really into High Priestess and Hierophant. I mean, a Hierophant is not a word I would use in real life. You know, it just sounds like a different kind of elephant to me. So these majors are quite like, you know, traditional Tarot de Marseille. And I like that, I'm into it. My problem is, so you go into the minors, and then the minors, so the minors are quite like the court cards, they go towards RWS. But you realise you're being plunged into the Middle Ages. And ladies and gentlemen, the Middle Ages is actually more archaic than the Renaissance. So tarot is a Renaissance thing, and RWS, you know, it's Edwardian, but it kind of refers to the Renaissance. But this old deck goes back pre the origins of tarot. And it's very nice, isn't it? But it goes back to the days when people didn't draw figures terribly well. What do I mean by that? I mean, it's sort of super archaic, I think. It seems like approximately the 12th century to me. And I quite like that, but I don't like it enough to love it. I find the faces, I don't need great faces in tarot, but I find the faces just a bit crazy. You know? A bit unfortunate. It's so far into the realms of pastiche that it kind of leaves me behind, really. And I thought I was going to love it, but again, I mean, it's quite an accurate pastiche. I think what it's done is it's used the very muted, slightly dirty colours of the Middle Ages. And for the minor arcana, the majors are a bit richer in terms of colour, but the minors are just a little bit dull, I think. And for me, tarot needs to get me up in the morning. I read tarot in the morning, and it's sort of my cup of coffee, and I don't find these energizing to look at. Sorry. So I think it's a lovely project, and I don't exactly disrecommend it. It's cheap as chips. It's nicely presented, nicely made, fairly good cardstock, quite a nice little white book, quite a nice box, and the whole thing comes in at about £25 or euros or whatever. So, you know, hats off, but it's not quite for me. 16. What deck would you never use to read for someone else? The Fyodor Pavlov deck is my answer to that. 17. What deck would you never use for yourself? Oh, the Fyodor Pavlov tarot. What deck could you not bring yourself to buy? And 19. What's your favourite pip deck? Well, it's the same thing for me, because I don't read with pip decks. I think some pip decks are insanely beautiful and pretty and lovely. And there is one, I think it's called the Estrella Tarot. And I've seen it many times, and it's gorgeous. It's got sort of film stars and pop stars in the major arcana, and it's very colourful and lovely and beautifully done. Can't quite bring myself to buy it because I wouldn't use it. And it's an indie deck, so it's not cheap as chips. So I regretfully have to pass on that one. 20. What deck slaps you with the truth? I don't think I've ever experienced being slapped by a deck. Not yet. So what's the deck that got away? Last question. Well, difficult to tell this story without giving away the end. But here's the deck that got away, and I've got it in my hands. So clearly I'm cheating slightly. But let me explain. It's the Attor Tarot by a brilliant artist called Robin Attor, who also did the International Icon Tarot, where everything looks like a sign at the airport showing you where the loo is. And these images on the Attor Tarot are sort of short and fat. The whole deck has got this lovely short and fat format. It's not long and thin and elegant. And everyone looks kind of like a crazy, highly stylized cartoon character. All the eyes are, hovering in space. I don't think there are any mouths. And I think it's very charming. It's the only cutesy wootsy deck. I've got the Hanson Roberts, which is a kitsch deck. It's the only cutesy deck that I can take seriously because it's so stylish, and also because it's very close to the Rider-Waite-Smith while having a very different atmosphere. And also it's made some very interesting design decisions. Its colouring is partly inspired by Pam's colouring and partly inspired by Frankie Albano's recolouring in the 60s. So it makes for a very colourful, very jolly and very energising deck. And I'd had my eye on this and wondering whether I wanted a cute deck. And then eventually I thought, I really need sometimes a light deck. Maybe I'm feeling depressed or something, and I need a deck which is light, and is not going to pull me down. And so, long story short, it went out of print, and then suddenly I was Googling around and I saw it again online, and it was there at one of these print to demand companies, the Attor Tarot, and it had pictures of the first edition, on the website advertising this bloody thing. So I sent them my money, and what did I get? I got the second edition, which looks like this, which I don't like at all, because it's not short and fat, it's not foreshortened. And as you probably noticed in the first edition, you don't have words on the minor arcana. They're lovely short fat cards. But here, let me show you comparable cards. Okay. So look, there's the first edition there. Slightly faded because this is an old copy. And there's the second edition. So presumably the print to demand company had certain shapes that it could work with and certain shapes it couldn't work with. This is an unconventional tarot shape. It's shorter and fatter. So the image is still short and fat, I would say, although it might even have been squashed inwards that way slightly. And then there's this great big bit of white left over at the bottom, and they've had to fill it with writing. And I think it's absolutely appalling. There's another example. So having thought I was getting these, and even though these were advertised, these arrived in the post. So I had a little correspondence with the print company, and they very nicely refunded my money. And then like 2 weeks later, I was online, I think I was on eBay, and I saw that the original, the out of print first edition came up. And so, ladies and gentlemen, even though it's the tarot that got away, it did get away, but then you know what? I got it back, didn't I? And now I'm the proud possessor of the Robin Attor Tarot, which is one of my favourite tarots in the world. Those were my answers to the lovely Lisa Papez's 21 tarot questions. I'm Robert Farrar, this is Tea and Tarot, and I'll be back next week with more of this stuff. Bye!